Hello everyone and welcome to the latest This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field, and I am Dustin. And today this past week, we had a lot of stuff going on. I had a lot of jobs that were being either closed out or bigger jobs. Some of the stuff that I had already started in previous weeks wrapped up this week. We had a lot of movement with a lot of different things when it comes to business development / business growth. So I want to talk about some of that stuff. But let's run down the jobs that we had for the week. So this week was a little bit different than normal because of a couple of different things. First off, I told you in the last week that I applied to be in LaTip. Well, it was approved this week, so I am officially in LaTip, and I'll get to that in a minute. But there was one of the members owns a pest control company and had a project that he was trying to get done right away, which was the van that he's currently using to work. There's something wrong with the engine. I'm not a mechanic, so I can't sit here and speak to that. He had something wrong with the engine, but in the back of the van, he has these tanks that he uses for different applications. One of them is for termites. So he wanted to be able to move one of the tanks into an SUV. So he came to me with basically the idea of like, what could I do so that I could potentially put this in my SUV so that I can continue to work. He had approached me late the previous week about this, but the problem was that I didn't know exactly how quickly he wanted to move on this. And when he finally reached back out, it was last Saturday, and he said that he was hoping to get this done so he could use it on Monday. Didn't exactly give me a lot of time, but at the same time, because I'm new to the group, I want to make sure that I am what's the best word? I'm helping the group out as much as possible, because I'm new. So I figured I would go out there, try to help him out. Essentially what I did was I created a sled. I don't have a picture of it, but I created a custom pallet that could fit into the back of his SUV so that he could keep the seats up, slide in it, and then you could mount the tank and the hose to it. That way he could take it out at any time as well. So that went pretty smoothly. I'd never intended on having him pay me anything for this, specifically because, like I said, I was just trying to help, and it's also hard to price something like that out. Now, to be fair, I was there for roughly 2.5 hours. We did have to run to Home Depot to get the materials. I told him, he asked me ahead of time, you have an idea of how much this will cost me on ballpark, and I said, let's just do this. I know that you're going to end up getting me referrals. I appreciate that. Let's just start, our referral relationship by me helping you out. So just cover the cost of the materials, and I'll help you build this thing because, I want to make sure that we're working together. So we bought the materials. The materials were roughly like $50. It was just really a sheet of plywood, some 2x4s, and a box of screws. You can pretty much do a lot of different things. I modeled this off of an idea that I actually have in my truck that at some point I'll show you guys. I know in previous weeks we've talked about the tools that I use, but I still haven't shown you the rest of the tools that I have inside my truck, so hopefully I'll be doing that soon. But I built like this custom rig so that I could put a pack-out mount onto it so that I could keep a pack-out set of drawers and a stack of other pack-out containers in my truck, and easy to take it in and out. Because of the way my truck is situated, there isn't a flat surface just to be able to put them in, so I had to build just basically a custom plywood mount to be able to mount the pack-out rack to, so that way it would stay in place. So it was essentially doing something very similar to that. Try to keep it as basic as possible because there's no reason to really make it unnecessarily complicated. So there's that. So he ended up giving me $200 while I was on my way out. Now, I did ask him if he wanted me. It was $200 cash, and I did ask him if he wanted a receipt. He hasn't gotten back to me on that yet, so I'm guessing no. So technically, that $200 is just cash in my pocket as I'm helping a friend out kind of situation rather than business related, because it's not business related unless he actually needs to have a receipt for it. So that was $200. Immediately after that, there was another job a couple months. It was not a couple months. Well, it was about 2 months ago. 2 months ago, and I don't know if it was before I started doing these videos or not, but there was a day where a family friend had reached out to me about fixing their fence. Now, I've fixed various parts of their fence, but they have a German Shepherd that's pretty big. And that dog has a tendency to jump up on the fence because it's a short 4-foot fence. Because it's not a very big fence, the dog is able to basically throw its weight into the top. So it makes the posts go back and forth, and in the process just flexes them to the point where they end up needing to be replaced. I've replaced multiple posts in the past in different sections. I think it was about 2 years ago, I went there and cleared out all kinds of overbrush that was leaning onto the fence as well. So it's been about 2 years. He's maintained that pretty well where there's not a lot of overgrowth, but it is still very close and there's not a lot of space. But he had asked me if I could take a look at the fence. I went like I said, about 2 months ago and took a look at the fence. And all I could suggest was to just try to brace it, because the problem is the fence itself is old. Every time I go there, there's like half a dozen or a dozen pickets that need to be replaced because it's just they're old and falling apart. And rather than trying to spend a lot of money trying to fix the fence, I'm just trying to maintain it so that it holds in place until he's got the money to spend to actually fix the fence. That said, what I did was I basically braced 3 different posts, replaced a couple of, I had to put in some reinforcements for some sections of the rails and get this all ready to go. And basically from there, it was basically just trying to get it in place. So I braced them. I have a piece of rebarb that's going into the ground that's holding it in place. It might buy him a year if he's lucky. But the thing was, again, I wasn't looking because he's a family friend. I was just looking to try to set him up so that it wasn't falling over and he wasn't having any issues. So that was basically that job. Again, I did tell him, hey, I'm only going to charge you the cost of the materials because you really need to start saving up for the eventual replacement of this. And he did say that he knows that he's going to have to replace it, and he probably is going to do it next year, but he's only going to replace that back section, which is the worst. So, because that's also the facing section of like everyone can see it who's driving by as well. So he said this, and I sent him a bill for $150. He ended up paying me $200, so essentially like a $50 tip. That did go through the business because it was processed through there, but I'm not having a lot of labor associated with that just because it was extra work. I don't count that as billable hours necessarily. It's just money that ends up existing. So that was Sunday. I typically, like I said, I don't work on Sundays, but I figured the pest control situation with the termite sled, that was about 20 minutes away and it was already about halfway to the family friend. So wanted to get that taken care of. So I consider that my day of, doing a lot of what I phrased it to my wife was obligated free labor. Just trying to get a bunch of stuff done. And then, of course, my wife had me plant a tree in our yard when I came back as well. So there was that. Monday, we went back to the doctor who has the junk that he's trying to clear out. Cleared out an additional bedroom and closet, and then started working in some of the space in the basement. There's a lot of stuff that came out of there. That stuff has all been sorted out, and most of it went to Goodwill, or it was stuff that was trash. So that's been taken care of. But that was the second visit. I have one additional visit that's coming up this coming week, and I also will be doing some painting there as well at the same time, and then I'll be getting him a bill for all of those visits. So that was Monday. Monday was a relatively short day, but I did have a couple of other things that I wanted to get taken care of back at home that day as well. Tuesday. So a couple weeks ago, I had an estimate for some vanities that needed to be replaced. And essentially what it wasn't vanities were being replaced, it was the bottoms, the inside bottoms of the vanity cabinets. So there was a lot of mildew spots that needed to get addressed. There was some water that they had to get fixed. And the plumber was supposed to come through the day before. I don't know exactly what the plumber did because it didn't look like he did anything in relation to any of the vanities, but they had shut-off valves sitting there like they were meant to be there, and they never actually installed them. So I don't know what exactly they were trying to do, but my job was to take out the mildew stuff or treat the mildew stuff and then replace the wood if necessary. So first off, we started off with the master bathroom. This was a double cabinet or double wide cabinet with 2 sinks, and it had a pretty big underside. And I replaced half because the other half had nothing wrong with it, and cut out the entire bottom. There was a very small piece that was kind of like a spacer piece to mount the brackets for the drawer into it. That was taken out as well because that was really bad. Treated the backside because there's not really an easy way to replace the backside. And then put in a brand new piece of plywood in the bottom, and then put contact paper on. And honestly, the contact paper is kind of overkill. It's not entirely necessary, but when you do have a seam in the middle, it's easier to just cover up the seam than it is to just have this ugly seam. You always caulk the edges to seal everything up so there's no holes or anything like that. And then you apply the contact paper. I hate contact paper. I hate contact paper. Like, it's like the worst thing in the world to deal with, especially inside cabinets. If I can, I'd rather just replace the entire base and then you've got a fresh base. The problem is that plywood doesn't have that same laminate look like a normal inside of a cabinet, and it looks more rough. So you kind of have to address that in some way. So that one was that. I did that, got it all hooked back up. That one took the longest because I was only cutting out half, and there was also drawers involved that I needed to reinstall or uninstall the slides and then reinstall the slides afterwards. So that one was there. Then we went upstairs to the bathroom at the top of the stairs where there was 2 cabinets, again, double sink. However, only one of them had issues. So we tore out the bottom of the one, put in a new bottom, put the contact paper, and then the other one didn't have any issues, but just so that they matched, I put in contact paper in that one. Again, not a fan of the contact paper. The ones that are not adhesive are great, but they are typically clear or white, and then you can see through them and see the bottom, which doesn't do you any good if you're trying to cover up, a small area that you had to caulk because the piece had to, you had to finagle the piece in. Then we go to this other one. It's kind of like a princess suite where it's like a bedroom and an individual bathroom. It's a smaller bathroom. That one, the bottom was also pretty bad, so we took out the bottom of that one. That one was a lot easier, and the reason why was because there wasn't the middle frame for the cabinet. It was just a simple 2 doors, no frame down the middle, because it was a much smaller vanity, so I was able to take out that piece. That contact paper was perfect because I was able to take the piece of wood that was going to go in place, dry fit it to make sure that it all fits inside, pull it back out, put the contact paper on it from the outside where it's nice and smooth all the way across, and then just slide the piece in, and then you've got it all set. So that job, that was a lot of it. That was one of the first jobs that I had priced with ChatGPT to make sure that I wasn't undercharging, and that job came out to $975. The customer was happy about everything. Also had 2 other projects they wanted me to take a look at. When I was out there 2 weeks ago, he had some water in his basement. So he wants 2 feet torn up of the drywall and trim all the way around the entire basement. There's a bar that needs to be completely removed. And then there's carpet. So all the carpet is going to get pulled out too. It's a pretty big job. I'm going to try to aim for that job to occur after the school year's over so my son can be helping out with that. Because it's really just tearing stuff out and then bringing it up to a dumpster and not making a mess and then cleaning up afterwards. So I've got to get an estimate out to him for that. But the other thing that he had was he has a reverse osmosis faucet system that was installed underneath the sink. But because he has quartz countertops, he needs the hole drilled for the faucet. I've done this one other time. The only thing is, while it is hypothetically a very simple thing, the problem is that if you make a mistake, you're on the hook for essentially a new countertop. So you really can't make a mistake. So you have to charge accordingly for that. So I did send out that estimate, and that estimate did get approved already. So I'm going to be going out there to take care of that. But that was basically my Tuesday. The other thing that popped up was in the middle of the day, someone from Latip, he's an HVAC contractor. He called me saying he also does appliance repair, and he had a dishwasher in one town over from where I'm normally at, or where I'm based out of. He had a dishwasher he couldn't get out. And I've run into this problem a couple of times where when they install new flooring, they put the floor in and they do not worry about the dishwasher being, having legs that extend down. He must not have seen this as many times, but he asked me if there was a way that I could go out there. Now, again, trying to be helpful, but the problem is that I'm starting to notice a pattern, which is nobody's asking me how much things are or how much I typically charge for these things. Helping somebody out is one thing, but when I'm spending time and money and gas going somewhere and taking care of something, even if it is something quick and short, there's still inherent cost associated with that. So hopefully I get that ironed out this coming week, because we've got a breakfast where we're all going to be interacting with each other, and I can try to communicate directly with these specific contractors who are going to start giving me tips, as they call it, but referrals. So I need to get that under control, because what happened was, as I got the dishwasher out, he had told the homeowner that he was going to have somebody else come out and take care of it. I came out, took care of it, but then the homeowner's like, okay, yeah, I'll settle everything with the other guy. And he never even knew how much I was going to cost in the first place. So I can't really expect the homeowner to pay my minimum, but at the same time, how does the HVAC person going to settle with me if he doesn't even have any idea how much I charge for something? So that's the one thing. And honestly, I saw him on Wednesday at the meeting, and he said thank you, and he was grateful for it. But the thing is, he never asked anything about the cost, so he probably doesn't even know that I didn't get paid. So I do have to have those conversations, but that's just the slow build of growing your networking referral system, but also an understanding of whether or not you're the right person to be sending over for stuff like that. So that was Tuesday. So Wednesday, we had the LITIP meeting in the morning. I was officially sworn in as a member. Outside of that, everything else was pretty straightforward. Nothing super unique coming out of that meeting as far as major referrals or anything like that. I think the problem is, like, some people in the room were waiting until I actually joined before they would come to me with any sort of work. So we'll see what happens. I know I'm getting calls from people in that group, or getting referrals. So it's not a matter of whether or not they're coming, it's whether or not they actually, turn into something where I'm actually making money. That's the biggest thing. So then I went to the location that has the bulletin board that I started the week prior. The post was set in the ground the week prior. This time around, all I was really doing was needing to create a mount for the bulletin board and then mount it to the actual post. So got that taken care of. That was pretty quick, just there for a little over an hour, getting everything lined up and set. Bulletin board turned out well. Customer was very happy. The next thing she wants me to do is, I think the next project is, there's some, in her specific house, there's some railings, wrought iron railings going up to her front door, and she wants those painted. There's a crack that she wants filled in, and then there's also her front door needs to be painted. So I do have to get her an estimate for that as well. She is out of town, and she also said that she is in no rush. So if I get her that estimate, it probably is not even going to happen until June anyway, because she's going to be out of town for a bunch of different points of time in the next couple of weeks. So that job, the bulletin board, was $750 all in with materials. After that, we had to go back to the house that I was at a couple of weeks ago, where I did the Knox box, which is that lock box with the key that the fire station is able to open up. That box, the issue was that I used Tapcons. So initially when I installed it, the whole thing was, it came with these flathead screws that were very clearly designed to go into wood. They were wood screws. They were not intended to go into brick. I just saw the screws and said, well, I can't use those because they're not brick screws. I'm just going to use Tapcons. I used Tapcons, got it installed, and the problem was that it took her a little bit of time to get the fire department to come out. When they came out, they tried to close the box, and the Tapcon heads were sticking out too far. So she had called me on, I think it was Monday, and said, you have to come back out because you have to use the flathead screws. So, of course, I started doing some research to try to figure out how I'm supposed to use those screws in the brick, and there really isn't a way to use those screws in the brick. You could do a couple of different things. You could drill the holes a little bit bigger, put some anchors in there, and then the wood screws will still grip on. But I wanted something that was going to be just secure in general. I don't want the thing coming off the wall. And the issue became, I looked online, and it turns out the type of box that she bought was not necessarily intended for brick. It was intended for wood. They have 4 different versions of boxes. One that hangs over, like curls over the top of your door itself. So you have a box up there. They have one that attaches to wood, which is their service mount, and they have another one that has a separate bracket where you mount the bracket and then you attach the box to the bracket. That's the one she really needed because she was going into brick, but one way or the other, she already had this one, and I had to figure out a way to make it work. So what I did was I drilled the holes a little bit bigger, put some anchors in there, and then I ended up using decking screws, which were very similar to the screws that were provided. The difference was that the screws that were provided were different lengths that weren't going to go too far past the brick in certain spots. So that got taken care of, but that was essentially a warranty call. And honestly, when I was originally there, it really wasn't that much. I wasn't there for that long anyway, so it's not a big deal. So that was that. After that, I went from there clear to the other side of my service area to do a quick job for my property manager. He had this unit that I'm going to be doing some work at very soon here. I'm just waiting on the materials to get in. He had this unit I did before I started recording videos, but it was an apartment turnover. And it was the very first turnover that I did for this property manager. And essentially, it was, there was some painting, there was some cleaning, there's some minor repairs here and there. I had to fix one of the doors. Most of the stuff was pretty straightforward. The issue that he had was, I guess a realtor showed somebody the unit, and because it had been sitting there for almost 3 months since I was there, nobody's gone in the unit. And it turns out there was a couple of different things where the bathtub had dead ladybugs in it. There was dead ladybugs on the windowsill, and there was some other dead bugs in some other spots. It was just typical bugs, nothing that is, like roaches. There was no roaches or anything like that. It was just, typical bugs, flies, and ladybugs that, get inside and they don't have a way to get out, so they'd end up dying. So he wanted me to go out there to clean that. That same day, there was a plumber out at that same unit. And they were they were doing a couple of different things not related to anything that I had anything to do with. I don't even know how, honestly, they found out about half that stuff. But took care of that stuff. And then there was just a simple service charge. So that was $150 for that. Jumping over to Thursday, we went back to the house that had the move-in repairs. Now this one is a little bit this one has become a massive pain in the butt. Because like I've said before, I've never actually met the customer in person, which it's hard to build that rapport. And I really wish I could have met her in person so I could explain some things. But she reached out to me last weekend and said, I do need you this week, because I offered her Thursday. And she said, I do need you this week. I need you to paint the powder room that you already, you had the powder room that you painted, finish the vanity and the sink installation, hang up a mirror, hang up a shelf, and then there was this other wall in the other bathroom that she wanted painted. So she said up front, I don't think it's going to be a full day, so, let me know what you're thinking. So I just simply told her, if it's not a full day, I'm not going to charge you for a full day. Don't worry about it. She also had a bunch of materials that she wanted me to dispose of, haul away and get rid of. The problem was that she was supposed to get back to me with the list at the weekend. She didn't. So when she sent me the list, it was like Tuesday night, and I was going there Thursday. I already had, like I said, a bunch of stuff already scheduled for Wednesday, so I didn't have a lot of time to go over it, other than just to briefly look over and realize, okay, I don't need anything. There's already paint on site. I didn't actually I think I said to her, I thought it was going to be 3 to 4 hours. I got out there, got all the stuff done that she wanted to do. The night before, the morning of, she ended up adding on 2 curtain rods that she wanted hung. And that was that. So my intention of going to this place was that I was only going to be there for 3 to 4 hours. I completed the stuff on her list. Everything that she wanted done was done. All the stuff was packed up in my truck. I was there for about 3.5 hours, which is dead center in the middle of what I told her. And then I sent her a message saying, I'm leaving now. And then she replied back, do you still have more time? To which I was confused by what she was talking about, because what time are you talking about? So I said, what is it you need? I have some time, but I still have to run to the dump to get rid of the stuff. And I had my business coaching thing at 4, so I needed to make sure that I had enough time to get back. The problem was that what she came back with was, I still need the laundry room painted. Well, we had talked about the laundry room being painted 2 weeks ago. And the issue was, I said to her at the time, I was like, I can absolutely paint it. However, all of the stuff in the laundry room is going to have to get removed because she had a lot of stuff in that room. And I said, that stuff's going to have to get removed ahead of time in order for me to be able to paint. So there was two things. One, she throws on the laundry room at the last second. I only had, like I said, about 2.5 hours roughly to be there for a full day. There's no way that I was going to get that whole room painted in 2.5 hours, number one. Number two, she didn't have any of the stuff removed out of that room for me to paint, which means I would have had to spend time taking everything out of that room and finding some place to put it because there wasn't a way to, paint the walls without that. That means that I could have been spending, 30 minutes to an hour clearing out the stuff that was in that room just to make sure that I could get in there. And then the third problem was that we only had a half a gallon of paint left from the other stuff because I picked up 1 gallon of paint the week before for the powder room and that other wall, but then she had me use some of that paint for the additional wall that she wanted done in the other bathroom. So there was only about a half gallon, maybe less. There's no way I'm going to be able to do it. Again, to go get the paint would have taken a 30-minute round trip to go get the paint, at least a 30-minute trip, maybe longer. So there wasn't a great scenario. And the problem is that when you tell a customer you can't do something that they want to do, the issue becomes, well, are you saying this because you legitimately don't, or are you just saying this because you don't want to? And it's not that I didn't want to. I don't have any problem painting a room. It's just I didn't have enough time in my schedule. Even if I knew about painting that room ahead of time, I still wouldn't have had enough time. Even if I picked up the paint on the way in, I still wouldn't have had enough time to get it done. So that's the issue. Again, prioritizing certain things, if I had a complete list ahead of time, it was like, here's 100 things. I'm prioritizing these items. Please get these items done first. The curtain rods that she had me install in her master bath maybe were not as important as getting the laundry room painted. The issue is that this coming week, I have a full plate, and the following week after that, I'm on vacation for the actual work week, and then I come back and I've got multiple big projects that I have to, work on, and I don't have a lot of time. So I'm not going to be able to get over to her place for probably 3 to 4 weeks, maybe longer. So of course, somebody doesn't like hearing that, and she didn't even respond when I said I didn't have enough time. And again, it's just that constant, there's no rapport with this customer that you've never actually come in contact with in face-to-face situations. So it's the one thing is I don't typically have a problem dealing with customers via text, but I have to establish, what I do, who I am, that kind of stuff. So it's not like I'm Joe Schmo who's just needing work, and anytime you come to me saying you've got more work, I'm just going to drop everything because it's more work. That's a chuck in a truck move, and that is not me. I like my stuff scheduled so that I can, account accordingly and plan accordingly. So there was that. So that said, that day was 5:15 specifically for that. Wasn't a full day. It was just materials and then roughly 3.5 hours of labor. And that was that. So I had the business coach after that. This week we were specifically talking about what your ideal profit your ideal hourly rate internally needs to be based off of your overhead and your owner's salary and how many hours you typically work in a week. So the research into my numbers was I'm charging exactly where I need to be. If I wanted an excessive amount of more profit, I need to be charging more, which I already knew. But I am making profit right now, so I'm not as concerned about that. So then we jump over to Friday. This customer was there a couple weeks ago, did that door repair and a faucet replacement. This time around, there was a drywall patch that came up last minute that she wanted me to do. The problem with the drywall repair is that you could apply the stuff. It's not going to dry super fast, even if you use something like Easy Sand 5. It's not 5 minutes. The mud itself will dry, that you're working with in the pan, but the stuff on the wall doesn't completely dry, so you can sand it right away. So there's that. She had multiple smoke detectors that needed to be replaced. One upstairs, one downstairs, one in the basement. And then there was a ceiling fan upstairs that was replaced as well. So we did that. Technically, this was a first visit because I'm going to go back to do some coach lights and these outdoor lights for the gazebo that for whatever reason, keep getting put off. And it's not necessarily directly me. It's almost like she wants me to be putting them off. Because this time around she was saying, oh, it's cold outside. I don't think you should do it today. And I could have done it. It wasn't that cold. I mean, it was like 42 or something like that, but it wasn't cold enough to prevent me from doing it. It was just more of I think she was just trying to prolong getting it done. So I told her that I would come back and take care of that work in the future and get that taken care of. So there's that. That was the only visit that day, except for I had an estimate that came up that morning. Like I said, I've been trying to get better about picking up the phone and making sure that I'm getting a hold of these customers. So I had a new customer call. They said that they had a variety of different projects they needed to do, but weren't extremely specific. They said they needed something to do with their deck. Of course, it doesn't. It more has to do with how extensive it needs to be. So I went out there. They actually have a shed that needs to be completely re-sided, wood siding. I don't do vinyl siding. But I have to pull off all the existing cedar siding that's there. And then basically all the trim. There's 2 windows. One of the windows is going away. The other window just needs to be replaced with a new window, just standard window. And then everything needs to be sided and trimmed out. So that's one project. The next project is they have a trellis that has rough sawn cedar, and I don't think they were maintaining or paying attention to how it needed to be maintained. It was painted, but the problem is that there's certain spots where the paint was coming off, and the top side, which was going to get obviously the most weather and sunlight, is the paint's bubbling, and then there's parts that are rotted. So that's a slightly bigger project. Mostly because there's like really big heavy pieces of wood they're going to have to get put in place. I'm not as keen on that project. The siding job for the barn is pretty straightforward. So I still have to send out that estimate. And then they had some other minor stuff inside, like they had to trim around a window in a bathroom downstairs that had some humidity, discolor it. So they have to replace the trim and then sand down the window frame itself. And then there was a door that is going to have to get replaced as well. So both of those projects will probably be separate down the line. I'm going to estimate out the shed first and then go that route, because I also don't want to be at the same house for like multiple days. The other problem that I've come to learn over the years when you have a customer who has lots of projects, and some of them are rather big projects, is that if you price out all of the big projects, they get sticker shock by, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. And then they start, maybe they reluctantly say they're going to do 1 or 2 of the projects, but it might not even be the project that you're actually preferring to do. So the problem is that then they end up choosing one that's not your ideal project. And then you do that project, and then they don't have the money for the other projects. So now they're not going to do any of the other projects. And you've spent all this time putting together these estimates. So typically what I like to do is I like to do one job at a time. I like to price it out. If they approve it right away and there's no issues, then I try to get them on the schedule right away. And if I try to get them on the schedule, then they'll get their project done. And once the project's done, move on to the next one. And try to give them priority with scheduling because it needs to get done. Now, at the same time, he stated that they weren't in a rush to get any of these things done. They're just things that they like to get done. So when I told him, at the moment for a bigger project, I'm booking like 4 weeks out, he didn't have an issue with that. So my focus is going to be doing specifically the shed, getting the shed done, having them happy with the shed before I even go the lengths of trying to figure out how to source the rough sawn cedar, which is not super easy to come by, and trying to figure out all of that. Because then there's the other issue is the other parts that are not being replaced are already painted. So then we're potentially painting everything, which means I have to prime that cedar, paint that cedar, and I don't really want to get down that line of having to do that, especially in the dead of summer when it's hot, depending on how far that goes. So we'll see what happens with that. Saturday, we have a large project for what I do. It's like total of $7,000, where this project is a property that needs to be prepped for sale. This is from the property manager. my intention on that specific day was to go to the property, do a lot of the outside work. There's some junk haul away stuff that needed to get taken care of. There was garbage that needed to get cleaned. There was bushes that needed to be trimmed. And then on the inside, there was a bunch of excess paint that needed to get taken out of there, like old buckets of paint. And then there was a drywall patch that I wanted to get at least started. We ran into an immediate problem when we got there, which is when I got there, the electric has been turned off to the property. So I have no electric. I can't turn on any lights, can't see anything. The house, because it's been cooler outside, the house temperature was 52 below the set 60 degree temperature that they have for the thermostat. So that becomes a problem as well. So we did what we could as far as, getting all the stuff out of the yard that needed to get taken out of, and then the bushes trimmed and picking up all the garbage around the property, outside of the property. But that was essentially all we could do. I did take a look at the drywall to see how extensively bad it is. I'm going to have to pull the toilet out to be able to get to the full area that needs to be replaced. It's like a wall right next to where the shower would be, so that you get some spray back on the wall. And I think at some point it was repaired, but it was only repaired with drywall mud, so that's part of the problem. So I gotta do that. But that's the majority of what I'm doing this week, outside of a couple of smaller projects that I'm just going to take care of. But the biggest thing is I need to get that rolling quick, because I'm like I said, I'm going to be out of town, and I'm trying to get both that project and another project for the property manager both done in May. And both of those projects total out over $9,000 for just those two projects. So I need to get that. I also, when I get back from vacation, I have a painting job that needs to be done over a weekend, because of the timing of when the new owners are taking over. That's not property related. Or property manager related. That's a different job. But there's all of that. So overall, it was a good week. $2,790 coming in. One new estimate went out. That same estimate got approved. One new client, which would be the client that I did that I'm going to be doing that estimate for the shed. There's a couple of other business related things that I'll quickly go over. I have been attempting to try to find someone to work with me. While my son is a great option, he's still in school for at least another month, and I'm starting to have too much work. I had ChatGPT analyze my numbers specifically for the last 2 years, and it basically says that Q2 is typically my busiest quarter of the year, and that seems to be holding true, because I have a lot of bigger projects coming up that I need to get moving on, and if I don't have somebody to help me with some of that stuff, it's going to take me longer. So I went about trying to find somebody on Indeed. I will say, for someone who doesn't spend a lot of money, and I know there's plenty of businesses out there that they spend a lot of money on marketing, or they spend a lot of money on other things. My overhead per month, I try to keep a very low minimum. I have a very tight when it comes to budget. Not that I can't spend more money, but I try not to spend more money. I understand that growing the business is going to cost additional money, but I don't want to be spending more than what I'm able to bring in. So that said, I went the route of looking at ZipRecruiter and Indeed to try to help me find somebody. The issue with ZipRecruiter was that it was more of like a set fee. Here, you can do this and it'll be a campaign, and we'll try to get people. What I've read online from a little bit of research is that people tend to have a little bit better. They find better candidates on Indeed compared to ZipRecruiter. I don't know how true that is, but I went the route of Indeed. I explained to Indeed that I wanted my daily budget to be no more than $80, and I wanted to run it for 3 days, so $240. And the whole reason behind this is you can put a free posting up there, but nobody will find it, and you cannot match candidates. So if they say, here's a candidate that works perfectly for this job, you can't see any of those details unless you pay for their premium version, which I get, they're a business, they got to make money, but it makes it very difficult for smaller companies like myself to try to find somebody. So that said, basically from there, I put up a job posting, increased to the premium version so that I could see the matched candidates. Interestingly, there were some perfect candidates, in my opinion, where they are existing self-employed handymen in the area, but none of their companies you can find online, which means either they are not good about running the business thing or they're just good at doing the work. So those would be the perfect people to bring into what I'm doing. Out of the 3 that I found, only one of them actually responded. And then when I tried to narrow it down and ask questions and try to get people to be engaged, a lot of that fell off. Out of everybody, I think I had 50 people apply for the job. Out of the 50 people, there was probably only about 12 that were actually qualified for the job or had some sort of experience. Out of the 12, I messaged them trying to get them to answer some applicant questions. Only about 6 of them responded. And then out of the 6, out of everybody actually, out of the same 12, I sent out a message saying, can you go to fill out this Google form, which is like a detailed application that has a bunch of information that I specifically want for my business that I didn't want to necessarily do through Indeed. Out of the 12 that I sent a message to, only 2 people filled it out. One of them immediately almost disqualified himself because he said he's only available nights and weekends, which that doesn't help me at all. And then the other person, they're the only person who filled it out, but they have low experience when it comes to construction. So not exactly great field of candidates when it comes to that. And I know that this is going to keep being a problem. But the problem is that I only had that ad technically up there for 2 days, and it racked up $225 of cost just from having that ad up there for 2 days. That sucks. Because that's a lot of money for somebody who doesn't spend a lot of money to try to find something and then not find anything at all. So that's unfortunate. So that was that. One of the things that I've learned or understood is that if I do bring somebody on, I need to make sure that I have a packed schedule so that a second person is going to be able to actually be afforded. I can afford to keep this person long term. So I'm trying to figure out ways of making sure that I have a full schedule. I have plenty of stuff to keep myself occupied for the next month. But if I was to bring somebody else on, things could start moving a lot quicker. And if that happens, then I don't really need to go the same route of what I've been doing, where I could potentially, if I get to the point where this person is perfect and I can send them off to do things on their own, perfect. If not, then there's no reason to keep them on. But the idea is that if I have enough work, that's the most important thing. So there's a company out there called Handyman Marketing Pros. They're one of the hosts, or the founders, one of the hosts of the podcast that I listen to, the Handyman Success podcast. And I've decided I'm going to set up an initial call with them, seeing what they could potentially offer me. The reason I'm potentially hesitant on any of this is because I already have an existing website. I already have this existing Google business page. I bring in reviews on a regular basis. I have a marketing thing that goes through my CRM. I don't necessarily need the entire package of what they offer. They have like a couple different packages. One of them is a package for startups who have nothing. They'll build a website, they'll create a Google profile, and then they have a pro version, which is they still build a website and they still do all of this other stuff that I already have. And then in turn, they also do additional things. Now, some of the additional things, 100% I like, but they have a 12-month commitment and it's like $500 for the pro thing. And $500 for 12 months as a commitment is a lot of money for a website that I already have created. Now, I'm not saying that my website's perfect and that they couldn't do things to optimize it better, but I do get customers on a consistent basis calling me on Google. Do I want to necessarily have 20 people a week calling me? No, because I don't have the capabilities of maintaining that work. However, at the same time, I know that if I start bringing people on, I need to have that. So it's this like balance of like, maybe just do an audit on my website and give me a custom package that's not one of your default packages of what you could potentially offer me to grow me in a way that makes sense, but also a way that I'm not paying for a bunch of stuff that I don't necessarily need. So we'll see what happens. I've got a call with them this week. And the last thing business related that I did was I set up Abby Connect, which is a company that's a virtual receptionist. I set up that account on Friday. I have an onboarding call with them this coming week. And essentially what they're going to do is just pick up the phone. So someone calls, they'll pick up the phone and they'll take the information that I need from them, as far as the contact information, the type of job, that kind of stuff. I worked with ChatGPT at some point trying to come up with a call script for that. So I have a general understanding of what I'll give them, but I have to do that onboarding call to find out what they actually need. So that should be helpful too, because the way it works is the numbers still go to my phone. If it's a number I recognize or somebody that I need to, that I would want to talk to, I can pick up the phone. If it's not somebody I want to talk to, or it's an unknown number or anything like that, I just let it go, and then it goes straight to them. And then they pick up the phone and get the information that they need, or that I need from them. So we'll see what happens with that, but that's another business growth. And then finally, the last thing, not related to necessarily business, but important, and I think it's something that is probably not focused on as much, is I performed what is called a health audit using AI, which is I went through and had a huge conversation with ChatGPT over multiple hours, talking about what supplements I currently taking, my current pain points that I have, current issues that I need to deal with, stress levels, sleep patterns, things like that, and basically tried to formulate whether or not I needed to adjust any of my stuff. And basically all the supplements I was previously taking, which I had been told various points were good, found out that a lot of that stuff was not doing anything for me, and either I needed larger dosages based off of my size or completely different types of supplements together. In addition to that, I'm having it work with me on different things, like I have really bad dry skin, so I'm working on trying to figure out better soap options for shampoo and beard, very, very variety of different things. But the whole idea is to try to get myself to be a healthy entrepreneur. If I am expected to grow this business and I'm expecting to be involved in the business and I don't, check myself out or sell off the business or something like that, I need to keep myself healthy. I don't need to have a problem where I can't run my business because I'm unhealthy or I have medical issues. So I'm trying to make sure that I keep myself in the best health situation that I can. A lot of the supplements, the sleep is just early correctness. Once I get back from vacation, I'm going to dive into a workout plan that I'll do here at my own house just to keep certain things from, seizing up. I don't need my back to go out because I'm working, only so much every once in a while doing a job where I have to lift a lot of weight. I don't need my knee to have a bunch of pain because I'm on my knees. I personally know that I need to lose weight, and I'm in the process of losing weight. I've actually lost almost 60 pounds over the last year. And I still have obviously more to go. But again, it's these things that you have to try to just think about and maintain the best version of you. As an entrepreneur, I think a lot of times we focus so heavily on the business and we're not focusing on ourselves or the relationships we have with our kids or our family. And I think that stuff is important. And I've said that before. While I don't work crazy hours, it doesn't mean that there's still not situations and times where I could make sure that I'm doing a better job with those things. So I encourage you guys, if you're watching this, maybe consider thinking about some of that stuff that could get yourself in a healthier situation or a better relationship with your kids or your spouse. So that way you're in a situation where you're in a better scenario long term. Your business is only as successful as you are. If something happens to you and you're running your business now, how's your business going to succeed? It can't. So that's what I keep going through my head. Is while I'd love to be able to grow it, to have other people do the work, that's not happening overnight, and I need to keep myself in a position where I'm at my peak to be able to keep running this until it's able to, run without me, essentially. So something just to consider. Take it as you will. So with that being said, hopefully you guys have been checking out the other videos that I release on Thursdays. Lately, we've been talking about jobs to say no to. We looked at my tools a couple weeks ago, and then most recently we've been talking about what happens on a weekly basis, and as well as what things have gone, what to do when things go wrong or things are unexpected. So be sure to check out those videos in addition to coming back here every Monday for This Week in the Field. While I am going on vacation, I have a little bit of a backlog of videos that are going to keep us through that vacation, and then we'll get a little bit more current. I think by the time July rolls around, we should be pretty close to where I actually am based off of how many weeks I had prepped ahead of time. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, please leave them in the comment section. I'll be sure to go through those. If you have anything specifically that you'd like to ask me about anything that I talked about here or about the business, be sure to leave those comments as well. Please like, subscribe, share the video. That always helps get the video out to other people, and the more people that see it, the more we can do to better the handyman community. So with all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field. We'll see you guys next time.